dog never barked. He just dug claws, tearing into the broken ground as alarms blared and the rain drowned the city in black water. They had hidden everything down there. The lies, the bodies, the truth they thought would never crawl back to the surface. And yet here he was, soaked, shivering, relentless, tearing open the world they buried 15 years ago. Somewhere above, men with guns shouted into radios, hunting what they didn't understand. They weren't chasing a man. They were chasing him, the dog, the last witness they couldn't erase. A single paw hit metal with a hollow clang, and the earth cracked open like a rotten shell, revealing a darkness deeper than memory. Inside that hole wasn't just a lab. It was the beating heart of something monstrous. And he had found it, before anyone else, before they could silence it for good. You think you know how stories end. You think you've seen loyalty. You haven't. Not yet. If you're ready to find out what one dog can change, like this video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from, and what do you think he just uncovered. The rain poured down over Portland like a curtain of shimmering steel, turning the streets into slick rivers and muffling the sound of the world. Marcus Hayes kept both hands tight on the steering wheel of Ambulance Unit 17, his partner yelling over the blaring sirens. "Left up ahead, Marcus." The dispatcher said, "It's urgent." Marcus barely nodded, eyes laser-focused on the glistening blacktop ahead. His mind moved as fast as the flashing lights on the roof, calculating distances, reading the unpredictable patterns of cars sliding over wet asphalt. In the din of chaos, the blur of movement was almost missed. A white shape darted into the middle of the road. Marcus slammed the brakes. Tires screamed against the road, and the ambulance jolted violently. Marcus's heart leaped into his throat. The sirens died under the sound of shrieking rubber, and the world lurched into a slow-motion stutter. Standing in front of the ambulance, soaked and shivering but unmoving, was a large white dog. Its fur clung in dripping ropes to its gaunt frame, and its dark eyes locked onto Marcus with unsettling steadiness. Marcus sat frozen for half a beat. His partner swore and leaned on the horn, a long blast that shattered the air. The dog didn't flinch. "What the hell?" Marcus muttered, throwing the ambulance into park. Without waiting for backup, he shoved open his door, the rain slamming into him like a wall. He approached slowly, hands low. The dog's muscles coiled as if ready to spring, but instead it backed away several steps, then sat again exactly where it had been. It was deliberate, not random. This dog wasn't lost or confused. It was waiting. Something twisted in Marcus's gut, old instincts kicking in. He crouched down, speaking softly. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you, boy?" The dog tilted its head slightly but didn't move. Marcus was close enough now to see the battered collar around its neck, the mud-caked tags jingling slightly in the storm wind. Something about them pricked the back of his mind. Reaching carefully, Marcus extended a hand. The dog allowed him to touch the tags. His fingers closed around the metal, turning it to the light. His breath caught. On the battered brass plate was a small, nearly invisible engraving, a symbol he hadn't seen in years. It was a Delta K9 unit emblem. Marcus staggered a step back, blinking against the rain. Delta K9s were elite military dogs, trained for missions no civilian could imagine. And this one, his mind spun as recognition slammed into him. He had seen this dog before. Not exactly this dog, but in the debriefing photos of Operation Nightwatch, a mission gone so catastrophically wrong it had ended his short career with the Rangers. 5 men lost, 1 dog listed as missing in action, a white German Shepherd. Codename Shadow. "Impossible," Marcus whispered. He rubbed his eyes, half expecting the ghost to vanish. But no, Shadow just sat there, rain cascading off him, waiting. Marcus's heart thundered. His mouth went dry. This wasn't just a stray, it wasn't a coincidence. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 17, we have a situation." Delayed response. "Tell ER to prep for 2. I'm following a lead." Before the dispatcher could squawk a reply, Marcus clipped the radio back to his belt and whistled low. Shadow immediately rose, tail low but wagging slightly, and began to trot toward the tree line. Without thinking, without hesitation, Marcus followed. Branches whipped against his arms as he plunged into the undergrowth behind the dog. His boots skidded in the mud, his breath coming in sharp gasps deeper into the woods lining the road. The smell of wet pine and earth filled Marcus's lungs. He ducked low-hanging branches, his mind reeling. How the hell had a missing Delta Canine ended up in Portland? And why now? And then there, half hidden beneath a twisted oak, a crumpled human form. Shit, Marcus hissed, bolting forward. An older man, mid-70s maybe, lay unconscious in the mud. His clothes were soaked through, his skin alarmingly pale. Marcus skidded to his knees, fingers finding a faint pulse at the neck. Alive, barely. He thumbed his radio again. Unit 17 to dispatch, a medical emergency confirmed. Male, unresponsive, hypothermia suspected. Request immediate backup to my GPS location. Shadow stood over them both, barking sharply now, almost urgently, as if pushing Marcus to move faster. Marcus stripped off his jacket and wrapped it around the man, already preparing to lift him when he noticed something else. The man's hand was curled tightly around a scrap of torn paper. Marcus pried it loose. Written in shaky scrawl were 3 words: "Don't trust them." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Who's them?" he muttered. But the man gave no answer, only the rain replied, relentless, as Shadow barked again, louder this time, as if warning, this was just the beginning. Marcus gritted his teeth against the pelting rain as he hoisted the unconscious man onto his shoulders, feeling every fragile bone under the man's soaked jacket, his own muscles protesting under the strain. Shadow whined anxiously beside him, pacing, glancing back toward the trees every few steps, as if torn between urgency as something else pulling him deeper into the woods. Mud sucked at Marcus's boots as he scrambled back up the embankment toward the road, his lungs burning, his mind racing. The man was light, too light for someone his age and build. Starvation or illness had been gnawing at him long before the rain had pinned him to the earth. As Marcus reached the edge of the trees, he caught a flicker of headlights, his ambulance still idling, doors swinging wide open in the storm. His partner Elena was leaning out, shouting something he couldn't hear over the wind, but she bolted forward when she saw Marcus emerge from the trees burdened with the limp figure. Together they got the man into the ambulance, the warm, sterile light revealing the deep purple bruising on his neck and the unhealthy yellow pallor of his skin. Elena gasped, already reaching for the monitor. "Stroke, maybe hypothermia," she said, her professional mask sliding into place. But Marcus shook his head grimly. He had seen strokes before, treated dozens, but something here didn't sit right. The man's breath was shallow and rapid, his pulse erratic in a way that didn't match typical cerebral incidents. Marcus's gaze dropped again to the crumpled paper still clutched in the man's hand. "Don't trust them." He shoved it into his own jacket pocket without a word. Shadow tried to jump into the ambulance after them, paws scrabbling against the bumper. But Elena pushed him back instinctively. "Animals aren't allowed," she snapped. But Marcus held up a hand, his voice low and firm. "He's with me. Let him stay." Something primal told him they would need Shadow more than they realized. Elena hesitated, then nodded once, and Shadow leaped inside, curling protectively at the man's feet as the doors slammed shut and the ambulance tore off toward St. Vincent's Hospital. Inside, Marcus monitored vitals, his gut twisting tighter with every passing second. The man, who the hospital ID would later confirm as George Barnes, was deteriorating too fast, too unevenly. It wasn't just hypothermia or stroke. His blood pressure kept swinging violently. His oxygen saturation was erratic, and his pupils, though sluggish, showed a weird flicker Marcus couldn't explain. "Poison," a voice whispered inside him. Something systemic, something drawn out. But that didn't make sense. Who would poison an old man, and why leave him to die slowly in the woods? Shadow whined again, pressing his snout against Barnes's hand, refusing to be comforted. As they roared through the wet streets, Marcus noticed Shadow's gaze fixate on something unseen beyond the ambulance walls. His ears twitching, his entire body humming with nervous energy. The storm howled harder as they pulled into the hospital bay, the emergency team rushing to meet them. Marcus jumped down, yanking the doors open. As they rolled Barnes out on the gurney, Shadow tried to follow but was blocked by hospital staff. Marcus leaned down, scratching the dog behind the ears. "Stay, boy. Watch," he whispered, and Shadow sat obediently, though his whole frame trembled with tension. Inside the ER, chaos erupted as the trauma team swarmed over Barnes. Elena rattled off vitals, but Marcus hovered at the edge, unease thick in his chest. Something about Barnes's symptoms gnawed at him. Not natural, not suddenly. Poisoning wasn't usually fast, unless it was acute but drawn out. This man had been dying for weeks. Marcus approached one of the doctors, a graying woman named Dr. Reeves he recognized from other late hours. He asked under his breath. Dr. Reeves frowned, shaking her head. Not common, maybe exposure or toxins, will run panels. Marcus nodded, but couldn't shake the buzzing alarm in his mind. As he turned to leave, his radio crackled to life. Unit 17, status check. He pressed the button. Patient admitted. Request temporary standby. Acknowledged, dispatch replied. Marcus clicked the radio back, his fingers drumming restlessly against his thigh. He needed answers. He needed to know what Barnes had been trying to warn them about. He needed Shadow's sharp bark to interrupt his thoughts. He spun around to see the dog pacing frantically near the ambulance, nose pressed low to the ground, then moving toward the bushes lining the edge of the emergency lot. Something about the dog's behavior set Marcus moving before he even thought about it. He jogged over, kneeling beside Shadow. What is it, boy? Shadow scratched at the wet earth, whining insistently. His paws dug furrows in the mud with desperate urgency. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. No one was paying attention. The ER staff was too busy. With a grimace, he shoved aside the rain-slick branches and dug with his bare hands. It didn't take long. Barely 6 inches down, his fingers hit something solid. A plastic-wrapped bundle. He tore it free, peeling away the layers with mounting dread. Inside was a small black case, military fusions. Its surface battered but unmistakably official. His hands shook slightly as he opened it. Inside, packed neatly, were several vials filled with a cloudy blue liquid, labeled with indecipherable codes. Tucked beneath the vials was a flash drive. Marcus stared at the items, heart hammering in his chest. Shadow nudged his arm, whining lowly. Marcus shoved the case under his jacket, casting a glance back at the ER entrance, where Barnes lay fighting for his life. This wasn't just about saving an old man anymore. Whatever Barnes had gotten tangled in, Marcus was now in it too, neck deep. He didn't notice the pair of shadowy figures watching him from across the parking lot, the faces obscured by hoods, their eyes sharp and measuring. Shadow did. The dog let out a low growl, body stiffening, but when Marcus turned, the figures melted into the storm, as if they had never been there. Marcus stood frozen for a beat, the rain drenching him to the bone, the black case pressing heavy against his ribs. Shadow pressed tight against his leg. He had a feeling this was just the beginning. Marcus tightened his grip around the black case, his mind racing through 1,000 questions with no answers, as the rain beat against the cracked asphalt like 1,000 frantic fists. Shadow pressed close to his side, Marcus swiveling constantly, nose twitching as if sensing threats Marcus could not yet see. Without thinking, Marcus started moving, slipping into the shadows between ambulances, ducking behind a dumpster as the figures across the parking lot disappeared into the storm. His heart hammered against his ribs, every instinct from his army days screaming at him to get out of sight, to disappear. He needed space, needed time to figure out what the hell he had just stumbled into. He slid his phone from his pocket, snapping a quick shot of the flash drive and the vials before tucking everything deeper into his jacket. Not here. He couldn't open it here. He needed somewhere no one would be watching. His mind clicked through possibilities with mechanical precision until it landed on the only place that made sense, the woods where he had found Barnes. Shadow whined low in his throat, as if agreeing with the plan. Keeping to the edges of the lot, Marcus circled back to the ambulance, grabbing his go-bag from under the seat and slinging it over his shoulder. He threw a glance at the ER doors, half expecting Barnes to be dead already, but the monitors inside still blinked stubbornly. Good. He had to move fast. Shadow followed him silently, both of them slipping into the tree line behind the hospital, the rain muffling their movements as they plunged back into the wet, tangled underbrush. The deeper they went, the thicker the mist grew, curling around them like cold fingers. Shadow's nose was to the ground, weaving slightly, and Marcus trusted the dog's instincts more than his own at this point. They made their way back to the clearing where Barnes had fallen, the ground already churned to mud by the earlier chaos. Marcus paused, scanning the tree line, every muscle tense. Then, slowly, he crouched, using his knife to scrape away a patch of sodden earth where Shadow kept sniffing and pawing insistently. His blade hit metal with a dull thunk. Marcus's heart stuttered. He dropped to his knees, digging with both hands now, mud squelching under his nails. Within minutes, he uncovered a rusted steel box, the kind used for military transport decades ago, its surface pitted and scarred with age. The lock was rusted through, the hinges shrieking in protest. Inside, wrapped in a cracked oilskin cloth, were bundles of paper, old, brittle, water-stained. He peeled one free, eyes narrowing as he tried to make out the faded lettering. His breath caught. It was a personnel file. Name, Thomas Hayes. Relation, father. Status, missing in action, 1997. Marcus's stomach dropped. His father, a ghost he had spent his entire life trying to understand. He rifled through the papers with growing desperation. There were mission reports, classified memos, photographs yellowed with age, all leading to one brutal truth. His father had not simply gone missing during a recon mission, like the Army had claimed. No, according to these documents, Thomas Hayes had uncovered something buried so deep even mentioning it had cost him his life. Shadow let out a sharp bark, pulling Marcus back to the present. The dog was pawing at another spot a few feet away, more frantic now. Marcus shoved the box aside and crawled toward him, digging with renewed urgency. His fingers brushed against something cold, metallic, and small. He unearthed it, a wristwatch, old, battered, the leather strap rotting away. Marcus turned it over, his breath hitching when he saw the inscription on the back, "To Mike Brothers Forever." M.H. Mike. Michael Brennan, Marcus's best friend from boot camp. The man who had disappeared 3 years ago under circumstances so suspicious Marcus had nearly destroyed his career trying to investigate. He stared at the watch, the blood smeared across the cracked glass face, the dark, dried stains that spoke of violence long past. Michael was dead, had been dead for years, but someone had taken the time to bury his watch here, in the same place where Barnes had collapsed, in the same woods where Shadow had appeared. Coincidence didn't exist in Marcus's world. Only patterns. Only connections. And this connection screamed louder than the sirens still wailing distantly in the city behind him. Marcus shoved the watch into his pocket, hands shaking. His mind raced through memories of Michael, their late-night talks about conspiracy theories and corruption. The way Michael had sworn he was onto something big right before he vanished. Marcus had tried to follow the trail back then, but every door had slammed in his face, records deleted, Oasis suddenly unavailable. And now here it was again, snarling up at him from the mud, dragging him back into the nightmare he had never truly escaped. Shadow whined again, nudging Marcus's arm, snapping him back into the present. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle, the forest humming with hidden life. Marcus stood, clutching the documents and the black case tight against his chest. He needed to get out. He needed to find somewhere to go through this evidence properly. Somewhere safe. Somewhere the people hunting Barnes and maybe now him couldn't reach. He turned back toward the hospital just in time to catch a flash of movement among the trees. Figures again. Watching. Waiting. Shadow bristled at his side. Hackles rising. A low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Marcus's instincts screamed at him. Run, now. Marcus yanked Shadow's collar, pulling the dog close against him as he backed away slowly from the edge of the clearing, his boots squelching in the mud, heart hammering so loudly he could barely hear the rain anymore. The figures among the trees didn't move, didn't speak, just watched, and that kind of patience told Marcus they weren't amateurs. He crouched low, making his way deeper into the woods, using the thick mist and darkness as cover. The shadow stayed glued to his side, moving with uncanny silence for a dog his size. When Marcus felt they had put enough distance between themselves and the watchers, he ducked into a natural hollow between two ancient oaks, shielding himself from view. His fingers worked quickly, pulling the documents from the steel box he had dug up earlier, skimming through the soggy pages by the light of his flashlight, its beam trembling slightly with the adrenaline still coursing through him. As he peeled apart the waterlogged files, a name caught his eye, a printed header half obscured by mold, but still unmistakable. George Barnes, Undercover Division, Internal Affairs. Marcus swore under his breath. Barnes hadn't been some random civilian or frail old man caught in the wrong place. He had been a cop, and not just any cop, a deep-cover agent specializing in internal corruption cases. Barnes had gone dark almost 7 years ago, listed as retired due to health complications. But from the dates on these files, he had been working long after his supposed retirement, tracking something massive. Marcus's hands moved faster now, flipping page after page, piecing the puzzle together. Barnes had been embedded inside an organization known only by initials. PRIM, a front company, outwardly clean, that masked a sprawling, lucrative black-admin organ trade ring operating out of the Pacific Northwest. Patients in desperate need of transplants were either extorted for money or replaced by buyers who could pay more. And those who couldn't afford disappeared. Marcus's stomach twisted into knots. He remembered scattered rumors from his days in service. Whispers among the soldiers about missing persons, about medical shipments that never arrived, about young, healthy men vanishing without a trace. But the brass had always shut it down hard, faster than rumors could spread. Now he knew why. Barnes had gotten too close, and judging from the blood-streaked files, he had paid the price. Shadow whined softly, nudging Marcus's elbow. He reached down, ruffling the dog's soaked fur absently as he dug deeper into the folder. A second document slipped free, thinner, newer. Marcus snatched it up, his eyes scanning the typed list of names under the heading, Prime. His heart skipped. There, third name down, was his own, Marcus Hayes. Age, occupation, last known address, all accurate, all terrifyingly detailed. Marcus tightened his jaw to keep from cursing aloud. He had never heard of Prime before tonight, but apparently they had heard plenty about him. His throat felt raw as he forced himself to keep reading. Phase 4. Target acquisition, extraction protocols, the assets to be neutralized to protect operational secrecy. His hands gripped the papers so tightly, the edges crumpled. Whoever Barnes had been chasing wasn't just dangerous. They were methodical, strategic, cold. Marcus's military record, his service in special recon, his time embedded overseas, everything he thought had been buried after he left the Rangers had been unearthed and catalogued. They knew what he had done. They knew how good he was at finding things that weren't meant to be found. And now they wanted him dead because of... Shadow shifted again, his body tense, his nose lifting slightly toward the wind. Marcus shoved the documents back into his pack, mind whirling. If Barnes had been trying to warn him, the old man had barely succeeded. But warnings weren't enough. Not anymore. He needed proof, irrefutable evidence strong enough to burn Prime down to the foundations. He needed whatever Barnes had left hidden. Lightning split the sky overhead, momentarily illuminating the forest in stark white flashes. And, for an instant, Marcus thought he saw movement again, shadows creeping along the tree line, too careful, too slow to be animals. His fists clenched. He had two choices: run or fight. Running would only delay the inevitable. Fighting would require knowing exactly what he was up against. Gritting his teeth, Marcus slung the pack over his shoulders and motioned for Shadow to follow. They needed a vantage point. High ground, somewhere they could regroup and plan. He remembered an old ranger outpost deeper in the forest, abandoned after budget cuts a few years ago. If they could make it there, they could regroup, review the files, and figure out their next move. As he started moving, head low against the wind, he felt the weight of the black case thumping lightly against his chest, a grim reminder that whatever had started tonight was far from over. Shadow kept close to his heel, his breath misting in the cold air. Somewhere behind them, the Watchers began to move as well, silent predators slipping through the mist after their prey. Marcus didn't look back. There was no point. He would either find the truth, or he would die with it clutched in his hands. The forest closed behind them as Marcus and Shadow navigated back toward the edges of the city, under the cloak of darkness. Every nerve in Marcus's body alive with tension. The black case bumped against his ribs with every step, a heavy reminder of the clock ticking faster than he could run. When they emerged near the hospital's service entrance, Marcus crouched low behind a maintenance shed, scanning the area. Emergency lights still bathed the parking lot in an eerie glow, but the ambulance bay was quieter now. The initial chaos subsided. Barnes was somewhere inside that building, vulnerable, exposed. And Marcus knew with a cold certainty that whoever was after the old man wasn't finished yet. Shadow pressed against his leg, tail stiff, muscles coiled tight. Marcus whispered, "Find," barely audible under the wind. The dog's ears flicked, nose twitching, and without hesitation Shadow moved, low to the ground, slipping toward the side of the hospital where the foundation dipped into a small concrete access point. Marcus followed, heart pounding. The access door was slightly ajar, swinging on its hinges in the storm's lingering breath. Someone had been here. Shadow didn't hesitate. He slipped inside, Marcus close behind, the weak emergency lights throwing long, distorted shadows down the service tunnel. The air was colder here, metallic, and something sharp and chemical stung Marcus's nose. Shadow moved faster now, his paws silent against the concrete. Suddenly he stopped, body rigid, tail raised in warning. Marcus's instincts screamed as he moved forward, crouching to see what had set the dog off. His flashlight beam caught a glint of something tucked behind a loose panel near the generator housing. He crept closer, careful, and when he peeled back the panel, his blood ran cold. It was a device, small and compact, packed with military-grade explosives. Wires coiled like veins around a detonator set to a timer already ticking down in silent menace. Marcus swore under his breath, stepping back fast. This wasn't some random act of terrorism. This was surgical, deliberate. Someone wanted Barnes dead and anyone else unfortunate enough to be inside when the bomb went off. He needed help, but calling it in would trigger protocols he couldn't control, and right now he trusted no one inside that hospital. Shadow whined low in his throat, glancing between Marcus and the bomb, sensing the urgency. Marcus's mind raced. He needed to find the detonator's controller, needed to know who had set this in motion. It was then that he heard voices echoing down the corridor. Casual, unhurried, not panicked. Whoever they weren't afraid of the consequences. Marcus grabbed Shadow's collar and dragged him into a maintenance closet just before two figures walked past, a man and a woman, both dressed in scrubs. Marcus held his breath, watching through the crack in the door. The man's face was familiar, too familiar. Dr. Emery Carlisle, the hospital's chief neurosurgeon. Celebrated, decorated, untouchable. Marcus remembered him now, years ago during his military service. A name whispered in the aftermath of Black Ops missions gone wrong. A surgeon who cleaned up certain problems. Who knew how to make inconvenient witnesses disappear during routine procedures. Carlisle's voice floated back down the hall. The package is secure. Timing's critical. We move once the old man is stabilized enough to be a liability. The woman nodded, her face grim. And if the asset interferes? Carlisle chuckled low and humorous. Then we make it look like a secondary blast, collateral damage. Happens all the time. Marcus's fists curled so tightly his knuckles cracked. Carlisle wasn't just complicit, he was orchestrating the entire thing. And if Barnes survived the bomb, they had backup plans ready to erase him from existence quietly, cleanly, without leaving a trail. Shadow growled softly, sensing Marcus's rising fury, but Marcus laid a calming hand on the dog's neck. No mistakes, not yet. He needed evidence, proof strong enough to not just stop Carlisle but to burn Prime's whole operation to ash. Carefully, Marcus slipped from the closet, sticking to the shadows, tailing the two doctors at a distance. They moved with practiced ease through the labyrinthine service corridors, never once checking over their shoulders, so certain of their invisibility it made Marcus's skin crawl. They disappeared through a secure door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," a retinal scanner blinking blue beside it. Marcus swore under his breath. No way in without clearance, no way to bluff his way through dressed like a soaked paramedic with a German shepherd at his side. He backed away slowly, weighing his options. He needed another entrance, another way into whatever den of secrets Carlisle had buried behind that door. Shadow nuzzled his hip urgently, and Marcus glanced down. The dog's gaze was fixed not on the door but the floor just ahead. A ventilation shaft, its screws rusted, the cover hanging loosely. "Good boy," he whispered. He pulled the grate free with a grunt, tossing it aside, and wriggled into the shaft, Shadow sliding in after him with surprising grace for his size. They crawled through the narrow, stifling metal tube, the air thick with dust and oil. Voices filtered up from below as they moved, distorted but urgent. "Transfer him tonight," Carlyle's voice said. "No more delays. We can't risk him regaining consciousness." Another voice, this one unfamiliar, replied, "The explosion will cover the extraction. We'll pin it on the asset." Marcus's blood chilled. They weren't just planning to kill Barnes. They were framing Marcus for it. He inched forward, peering through the vent slats into a dimly lit operations room. Banks of monitors lined one wall, displaying live security feeds from every corner of the hospital. In the center of the room, Carlyle and two other men hunched over a blueprint spread across a table, the hospital's substructure. Every hallway, duct, and maintenance tunnel meticulously mapped. Marcus memorized as much as he could in the brief glance he had. Then his eyes caught something else. A small metal box sitting open beside the plans of the controller for the bomb, red LED blinking softly. His gut twisted. He was running out of time. He backed away from the grate, careful not to make noise, heart thundering in his ears. Shadow followed, his breathing shallow. They needed to disable the bomb, rescue Barnes, and expose Carlyle, all without getting caught or killed. Simple. Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Almost. He wriggled back toward the shaft's entrance, mind spinning, calculating, planning. He didn't have much time, and the clock wasn't the only thing hunting him now. Marcus wriggled free of the ventilation shaft, landing in a crouch just inside a janitor's closet adjacent to the main emergency hallway, heart pounding against his ribs with a ferocity that almost deafened him. Shadow leapt out after him, his fur matted with sweat and dust, but his eyes sharp, alert. Time was slipping away fast, but Marcus's mind churned faster, slicing through possibilities and escape routes. He wiped his muddy hands on his jeans, adjusting the pack slung over his shoulder where the damning files and black case weighed heavier with every heartbeat. He needed to reach Barnes now, before Carlyle's people could move him or set off the charges. But as he cracked the door open, scanning the empty hallway beyond, something else caught his attention. A flash of color, a familiar voice. It was her, the woman who had appeared earlier claiming to be Barnes' daughter. She stood outside Barnes's ICU room, speaking urgently into a phone. Her posture taut, her words clipped and businesslike, nothing like the distraught family member she had played earlier. Marcus narrowed his eyes, pushing the door open wider just enough to hear snippets of her conversation. He sent his younger sister a quick look. "No, the extraction window is tight. We move before the secondary phase. I understand the director's timeline, but if the storm weakens visibility..." She broke off suddenly, her gaze flicking toward the far end of the hall as if sensing eyes upon her. Marcus pulled back just in time, heart hammer. Secondary phase, director, storm. Every nerve ending in Marcus's body flared alive. This woman wasn't Barnes' daughter. She wasn't even family. She was an operative, part of whatever organization Barnes had been trying to expose, embedded deep enough to move through the hospital unquestioned. Marcus clenched his jaw, piecing together the timeline rapidly. Barnes hadn't simply collapsed in the woods. He had been left there intentionally, removed from the hospital under false pretenses, and dumped like a broken tool when he became inconvenient. And the woman posing as his kin had been there to smooth the cover-up, to guide the narrative and, if necessary, finish the job. Shadow growled low under his breath, the sound vibrating against Marcus's leg. Marcus leaned down, murmuring, "Steady, boy, not yet. If they made a move now, they'd blow everything." He needed proof first, proof that would survive if they didn't. Carefully, Marcus edged down the hallway, sticking to shadows, ears straining. The woman ended her call and pushed open Barnes's door, disappearing inside. Marcus cursed silently. He needed to intercept, but not head-on. He spotted a nurse station down the hall and an unattended workstation blinking with a login screen. Thinking fast, Marcus crept over, hacking quickly into the system, bypassing standard admin blocks with tricks he hadn't used since the military. Within seconds, he was inside the hospital's internal logs. He searched for her using Barnes's visitor history, and there she was, listed as Emily Barnes, next of kin, admitted under emergency family protocols during the storm event. Marcus clicked deeper, heart sinking. The approval for her access had come from a direct Carlyle directly. Figures. But what made Marcus's blood run cold was the attached note buried in the metadata. A directive code, prime clearance read, Storm cover active. Storm cover. It wasn't random. It wasn't nature. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling security reports, maintenance logs, anything tagged unusual during the last 72 hours. A buried environmental report surfaced, technical, full of jargon, but the core of it was chilling. Atmospheric anomalies detected. Localized electromagnetic pulses. Unauthorized frequency spikes tied to Project Helix, a DARPA-backed experimental weather control program that had been mothballed years ago, officially. Except here it was, alive and operational, quietly resurrected for private use. They had manufactured the storm, created the rain, not as an experiment but as cover. Under the heavy weather, satellite feeds had been scrambled, drones grounded, local surveillance jammed. They had wrapped the entire city in a fog of plausible deniability and moved their pieces unchecked. Barnes's disappearance, the bomb placement, even Marcus's own arrival, all had played out under a false sky. Marcus leaned back, bile rising in his throat. Weather control wasn't science fiction anymore. It was a weaponized reality. A low hiss from Shadow snapped Marcus out of the spiral. The woman Emily was exiting Barnes's room now, her posture sharp, almost predatory. She adjusted something under her coat. Marcus caught the briefest glimpse of a syringe, and then she disappeared down the opposite corridor. Marcus cursed under his breath. She had dosed Barnes, or tried to. He needed to move, and fast. He slammed the terminal shut and melted back into the hallway, signaling Shadow for... They slipped toward Barnes's room, Marcus checking every angle, every camera, every blind spot. The door was ajar, the machines inside beeping steadily, a monotonous rhythm that belied the danger coiled around them. Barnes lay pale and still, oxygen hissed into his nose, oxygen saturation dipping, arrhythmias flaring. He wasn't dying naturally. He was being sabotaged. Marcus rifled through the bedside trays until he found a small capped syringe tucked into the sheets. The liquid inside a faint milky blue. Neurotoxin. Fast, untraceable once metabolized. He pocketed it grimly, his mind locking into soldier mode. They weren't going to get away with this. Not tonight. Not while he still had breath left. A faint echo of footsteps brought his head snapping up. Reinforcements coming. Marcus grabbed Barnes's chart, ripping it free of the hook, tucking it under his arm along with the syringe, and motioned Shadow toward the door. They needed to vanish, take Barnes if possible, or at least secure him somewhere the killers couldn't reach. But as they slipped back into the hallway, Marcus's blood froze. The elevator at the far end dinged softly, the doors sliding open to reveal Carlyle and two men in dark tactical gear stepping out into the corridor, their faces impassive, their hands brushing against concealed weapons under their coats. Marcus froze, heart hammering in his chest as Carlyle and his men advanced slowly down the hallway, their steps casual but predatory, like wolves closing in on prey. Shadow pressed against Marcus's leg, a low growl vibrating in his throat. But Marcus knew better than to fight here, exposed and outnumbered. He scanned the hallway for options, spotting a door marked decontamination, staff only, slightly ajar to his right. Without hesitation, he nudged Barnes's gurney and slipped through, dragging the bed inside just as the tactical team rounded the corner. Inside, the room was a cramped, sterile chamber lined with lockers and old supplies, forgotten by the nightly cleaning crews. Marcus locked the door silently, wedging a metal stool under the handle for good measure. He turned back to Barnes, whose shallow breathing rasped against the oxygen mask. Time was slipping through his fingers. Marcus needed a way out, but more than that, he needed to know why Barnes was worth this much effort to silence. His eyes drifted to the old man's exposed arms, the skin bruised and weathered from years of life lived hard. Instinct whispered at the back of Marcus's mind. He grabbed a plastic basin from a nearby shelf, filled it with cold tap water from the utility sink, and soaked a clean cloth. Gently, he pressed it against Barnes's left forearm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, something emerged, something almost invisible under normal light, bloomed across Barnes's skin like ink bleeding through paper. Marcus leaned closer, heart hammering. It wasn't random. It was a design, a miniature map etched into the skin itself, hidden by specialized ink only activated by water and heat. A network of tunnels, access points, and maintenance shafts spiderwebbed across the old man's arm, leading to a bold circle marked deep beneath the hospital structure. Marcus's pulse quickened. The dark section, he murmured, recognizing the hospital's old blueprints he had glimpsed briefly earlier, an area beneath the sub-basements, sealed off 15 years ago after structural damage officially. At least, no public records. No renovations. Just forgotten darkness. Or so they wanted people to think. Shadow whined, nose twitching toward the door, but Marcus had no time to second-guess. He tore a photo from his notepad, quickly sketching the map as best he could before the water dried and the lines faded again into ghostly oblivion. When he finished, he pressed the cloth to Barnes's chest, repeating the process. Another set of markings bloomed faintly. Access codes, old security clearances tied to specific doors and maintenance hatches. Barnes had turned his own body into a blueprint for escape, survival, and revenge. Marcus felt a jolt of raw admiration through the rising storm of fear. Barnes had known they would come for him, known that any electronic data could be wiped or corrupted. His skin was the one place they couldn't easily erase. Marcus folded the sketch into his jacket and turned toward Shadow, who was now pawing at a loose grate near the floor with growing urgency. Marcus crouched beside him, prying the panel free, revealing a narrow service tunnel slanting downward into blackness. Shadow barked once, sharply, and bolted forward into the passage without hesitation. Marcus spared a final glance toward Barnes, guilt gnawing at him for leaving the old man defenseless. But he knew Barnes's best chance now lay in Marcus finding whatever secret was buried below. He would come back for him. He had to. Slipping into the tunnel after Shadow, Marcus pulled the grate back into place behind him, plunging into claustrophobic darkness. The air grew colder, damper, filled with the scent of mildew and rust as they descended deeper beneath the hospital's foundations. Pipes ran along the walls, groaning with the building's mechanical life. Shadow moved ahead confidently, occasionally glancing back to make sure Marcus followed. The tunnel sloped steeper, until finally it leveled out into a wider maintenance corridor lined with heavy industrial doors. Marcus checked his stolen map, matching landmarks by flashlight, a cracked ventilation shaft here, a rusted valve there. They were on the right path. After what felt like miles, Shadow stopped abruptly in front of a door half sunken into the wall, its edges rimmed with black mold. Marcus wiped grime from a corroded sign above it. Sub-basement access, Section D. His heart thudded. This was it. He pulled gently on the handle, surprised when it creaked open under his touch. The passage beyond was worse, narrow, broken in places, the walls bleeding moisture. But ahead in the flickering distance, Marcus could make out the outline of reinforced storage units, long abandoned but still sealed. Shadow moved forward, nose pressed to the ground, weaving carefully between fallen debris until he stopped in front of a large metal door with a biohazard symbol half scraped away. He pawed at it insistently, then sat back, staring at Marcus expectantly. Marcus approached cautiously, his boots splashing through shallow puddles, and pressed his hand against the icy surface. A keypad blinked to life beside it, ancient but still functional. He dug into his pocket, pulling out the codes he had copied from Barnes's chest. Holding his breath, he entered the sequence slowly, deliberately. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a reluctant groan, the door unlocked, swinging inward on rusty hinges. Beyond lay a cavernous space, untouched by time, shelves stacked with file boxes, computer drives, even old analog reels labeled with cryptic notations. Dust danced in the beam of his flashlight. Shadow growled low again, hackles rising. They had found the forgotten archive of Prime, 15 years of secrets entombed beneath the city, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to unearth them. Marcus stepped cautiously into the archive chamber, the metallic taste of damp air clinging to his tongue, every instinct in his body screaming that he had crossed a threshold not meant to be found. Shadow pressed close against his leg, nose twitching, body tense like a coiled spring. The shelves stretched endlessly into darkness, packed with records too sensitive, too dangerous to ever see daylight. Marcus moved quickly, scanning labels, grabbing any files that mentioned Prime, extraction, or patient transfers. Time was the enemy now, more than ever. His mind raced through plans on how to smuggle these documents out, how to get Barnes to safety, and how to avoid the net that Carlisle's men were casting tighter by the second. A sudden clatter echoed down the corridor outside, the sharp metallic clang of boots on concrete. Shadow stiffened, growling deep in his throat. Marcus cursed silently, shoving as many files as he could into his pack, snapping pictures of the most critical documents with his phone before backing toward the door. He killed his flashlight, plunging them into near-addle darkness. The only illumination came from the faint emergency lights flickering somewhere far above. Movement blurred at the edge of his vision, a shadow detaching itself from the far side of the chamber, moving too smoothly, too purposefully to be accident. Marcus melted into the nearest aisle, pressing himself flat against the shelving. He caught a glimpse of the intruder, a man in surgical scrubs, carrying what looked like a medical case, but the way he held it, the way he scanned the room with predatory sharpness, told Marcus everything he needed to know. This wasn't a doctor searching for supplies. This was an assassin hunting a target. And from the angle he moved, the man wasn't here for the files. He was heading for the maintenance tunnel, the exact route Marcus had used. A sick realization twisted Marcus's gut. Barnes. They weren't waiting for the bomb anymore. They were accelerating the plan. They were going to kill Barnes quietly, surgically, and blame the resulting chaos on Marcus himself. The shadow shifted beside him, tense, waiting for a signal. Marcus clenched his fists. He couldn't let Barnes die. Not now. Not after coming this far. Silently, he moved to intercept, using the shelves as cover, slipping behind the man just as he passed the archive's threshold. The assassin's steps were brisk, confident. Too confident. Marcus stalked him, keeping his breathing low, his movements calculated, waiting for an opening. But before Marcus could act, Shadow's growl deepened into a snarl, and Marcus's gaze snapped up. Another figure was rounding the corner ahead, a man not in scrubs but in civilian clothes, his posture loose, casual, too relaxed for someone wandering emergency access corridors in the middle of a lockdown. Marcus's blood froze as recognition struck him like a hammer. He knew that face. He had studied it for years in grainy surveillance photos, military debriefings, and police reports. The man had been present the night Marcus's father disappeared, seen in the background of a single security feed at the perimeter of the operations base, face half obscured by a cap, walking away just minutes after Thomas Hayes vanished without a trace. He had been classified as unknown operative, and then conveniently scrubbed from every official record. And now he was here, in this hospital, walking straight toward Barnes's room. Marcus didn't think. He reacted. He loosed Shadow with a sharp gesture. The dog lunged forward, a silent missile of muscle and fury. The man barely had time to register the threat before Shadow hit him square in the chest, knocking him backward into the wall with a bone-jarring thud. Papers and equipment clattered to the floor. The fake doctor spun around, pulling a small pistol from under his scrub top, but Marcus was faster. He tackled the man from behind, driving him into the ground with brutal efficiency, the gun skittering across the tiles. Marcus pinned the assassin's arm behind his back, growling low into his ear. "Who sent you?" The man said nothing, only spat blood and grinned with broken teeth. Marcus tightened his grip until the man's shoulder popped with an audible crack, but the man only laughed harder, eyes glittering with fanatical madness. From the corner of his eye, Marcus saw the other figure, the ghost from his father's past, scrambling to his feet, wrenching free from Shadow's snapping jaws. He bolted down the corridor, disappearing into the maze of tunnels. Marcus cursed but didn't give chase. Barnes came first, always Barnes now. He yanked the fake doctor upright, dragging him back toward the maintenance shaft entrance, Shadow at his side, snarling low and deadly. They burst back into the main service corridor just as alarms began to blare through the hospital. A shrill wail of evacuation warnings. The bomb timer time was out. Marcus shoved the assassin into a supply closet, slamming the door shut and jamming a broom through the handle to hold it closed. He had maybe minutes before everything went sideways. He sprinted down the hall toward the ICU wing, Shadow racing ahead, barking to clear a path. Nurses screamed, patients cried, chaos erupted around them. Carlisle's men would be moving now too, closing off exits, hunting for Marcus like hounds on blood. Marcus skidded around a corner, nearly plowing into an orderly fleeing the opposite way. He shoved past, slamming his shoulder into the ICU doors. They banged open with a hollow boom, and there, in the center of the room, Barnes lay unconscious. Monitors screaming warnings Marcus didn't have time to decipher. A figure loomed over the bed, A different doctor, or at least dressed like one. Syringe in hand, ready to plunge it into Barnes's IV line. Marcus didn't hesitate. He barreled into the man, sending the syringe flying, fists finding purchase in soft flesh. The fake doctor went down hard, cracking his head against the tile. Shadow stood over him, growling as Marcus ripped the IV from Barnes's arm, wheeling the gurney around. He needed an exit. He needed it now. But even as he threw open the nearest door, dragging Barnes's bed into the corridor, Marcus knew this wasn't over. The real storm hadn't even begun yet. Marcus gritted his teeth as he pushed Barnes's gurney down the chaos-choked corridors, the shrill wail of evacuation alarms echoing around them, the flicker of emergency lights casting erratic shadows along the walls. Shadow ran ahead, ears pinned back, snarling at anyone who stepped too close. Every instinct Marcus had screamed that they were running out of time, but he knew that escaping the hospital without answers would mean nothing. They had one chance, one sliver of an opening to expose Prime, and it was hidden somewhere on Barnes's person. As he careened around a corner into a deserted service elevator bay, Marcus slammed the brake on the gurney and yanked the control panel open, hot-wiring the elevator in seconds. The doors groaned shut just as shouts erupted down the hallway behind them. Marcus sagged against the wall for half a heartbeat, lungs heaving, sweat stinging his eyes. Then he turned back to Barnes, scanning the old man's battered body. His fingers worked quickly, searching seams, hidden pockets. Nothing in the clothes, nothing obvious. He cursed under his breath. Barnes had to have hidden it better. His gaze dropped to the hospital gown, noticing for the first time a slight bulge stitched into the inner lining at the chest. With trembling hands, Marcus tore it open, revealing a tiny black capsule no bigger than a thumb drive, sealed against water and impact. Micro recorder. Heart pounding, Marcus plugged it into his phone with a converter cable from his bag, fingers fumbling in his urgency. The file inside was labeled simply, Last Testament. He hit play, static crackled, then a ragged voice filled the elevator. Barnes's voice, raw with pain but clear. "If you're hearing this, then I've failed," the old man rasped. "Crimes deeper than you think. They don't just traffic organs. They erase people, whistleblowers, soldiers, scientists, anyone who knows too much. I tried to expose them, but they got to my team first. They buried the truth under fake deaths, false retirements, accidents. They control the hospitals, the law enforcement, the news feeds. Not even..." The recording paused and Marcus leaned closer, straining to hear. Barnes's voice cracked, softer now. "Not even the children of those they couldn't break." Marcus's blood turned to ice. Shadow whined softly at his side, pressing against his leg. The recording continued, Barnes's voice trembling. "If you find this, Marcus Hayes, you were never supposed to be part of it. Your father tried to protect you. He stumbled onto Prime's deepest project, Project Helix, not just weather manipulation, but biological enhancement experiments. Super soldiers. Mind control trials. He tried to leak it and they erased him. I tried to help him, but they silenced him before I could act. And your brother..." He barely remembered his brother Jacob, older by 7 years. A shadowy figure in his childhood memories. Always on the move, training, gone on classified missions nobody could talk about. Jacob had vanished when Marcus was still a teenager, the official story claiming a training accident overseas. Marcus had never believed it, but the years had buried the questions under grief and silence. "Jacob Hayes," Barnes's voice whispered through the speaker, thick with regret. "Jacob was Prime's first civilian casualty. He found out. He planned to expose them. He stole files, witnesses, evidence. But he trusted the wrong people. They ambushed him, took everything. His daughter..." Marcus's throat closed up as the truth clicked into place with a horrifying finality. Shadow. Shadow wasn't just a random K9 from a lost mission. He belonged to Jacob, raised by him, trained by him, lost when Jacob was lost, and somehow, against every odd, Shadow had survived, carrying the ghost of Marcus's brother forward into a future neither of them had been meant to see. Heart hammering as the recording reached its end. The archive beneath thinks it's the only way to burn them down. Find it, finish what we couldn't. Trust no one, not even the uniforms, especially not the doctors. And if you see her, the woman with the silver locket, run. The file ended in a harsh burst of static just as the elevator jerked to a halt at the sub-basement level. Marcus wiped a hand across his face, fury and sorrow burning together in a volatile cocktail inside his chest. Prime had taken his father, his brother. They had tried to take Barnes. Now they were coming for him, but not if he got to them first. The elevator doors creaked open onto a dim, deserted hallway lined with industrial piping and reinforced concrete walls. No cameras, no patrols. Yet Shadow moved ahead, ears perked, tail stiff with tension. Marcus adjusted the pack on his shoulders, tightened the straps. He was done running, he was done hiding. They wanted a ghost, they would get one. As he pushed Barnes's gurney into the darkness, ready to disappear from the surface world entirely if necessary, the faint sound of boots echoed in the distance, more hunters sweeping the lower levels. Shadow growled, hackles rising, muscles coiled, heart steady. Somewhere ahead, buried in the heart of the forgotten hospital bowels, lay the archive, the final piece. The truth no one wanted found. The hallway stretched endlessly before them, the weak emergency lighting flickering against cracked concrete and rust-stained pipes, painting a landscape of decay and forgotten sins. Marcus moved quickly, pushing Barnes's gurney with one hand while keeping the other firmly on the weapon tucked at his belt. Every muscle wired tight with anticipation. Shadow padded ahead, his nose low to the ground, sniffing with growing intensity, his body language shifting from wary to determined. They were deep now, deeper than most would even realize existed beneath a hospital, walking not in a place of healing but along the bones of a machine built for concealment and control. Somewhere above them, alarms continued to wail in the upper floors, but down here it was silent, too silent. The kind of silence that wrapped around the heart and squeezed until breathing became a conscious effort. Marcus gritted his teeth, checking his stolen map again, matching the crumbling markers on the walls to Barnes's inked blueprint. They were close, but something wasn't lining up. A missing wall, a sealed corridor. Prime had altered the structure, buried the evidence even deeper. Shadow suddenly stopped dead, his tail's fifth ears pricked forward. He let out a low, urgent bark, then began to scratch furiously at the cracked concrete near a sagging support beam. Marcus rushed to his side, crouching down, feeling the vibration through the floor as Shadow dug, paws working with desperate speed. A loose tile shifted under the assault, revealing a faint seam Marcus hadn't noticed before. Without hesitation, Marcus grabbed a crowbar from a maintenance rack and pried at the crack, muscles straining until the slab lifted with a groan of protest. Beneath it was a darkness even blacker than the hallway, the stale air rushing out with the smell of old death and chemical rot. Marcus shone his flashlight into the void, revealing a narrow stairwell spiraling downward, far below the known hospital structure. Shadow whined softly, but his tail wagged once, sharply, ready. Marcus looked back toward the way they had come. No sounds of pursuit yet, but it was only a matter of time. He pushed Barnes's gurney to the edge, locking the wheels, then hoisted the old man into a fireman's carry over his shoulders, grunting under the weight but refusing to falter. With Shadow leading the way, they descended into the dark. The staircase twisted for what felt like forever, the temperature dropping with every step until Marcus's breath fogged in front of him. Finally, they reached a heavy metal door marked only by a faded biohazard symbol. Marcus tested the handle, finding it unlocked, and pushed it open with his shoulder. The room beyond stole his breath. It wasn't a morgue. It wasn't a lab. It was something in between, a hybrid facility where human experimentation had been refined into an art form. Stainless steel tables lined the walls, each one bolted with restraints still smeared with dried blood. Cabinets overflowed with vials of unknown substances, medical charts written in codes Marcus couldn't immediately decipher. Old computer terminals blinked sluggishly in sleep mode, their fans still humming faintly. And at the center of it all stood a massive server rack, humming with latent power, untouched by time or destruction. Shadow growled lowly, circling the perimeter, his hackles raised. But Marcus's attention was locked on a terminal that blinked to life as he approached, as if recognizing him. A login screen greeted him, demanding credentials he didn't have. But his military instincts kicked in, and within minutes he bypassed the basic security protocols, revealing file directories dated back 15 years. He scanned quickly, eyes widening as he realized what he was seeing: records of the experiments Barnes had mentioned. Project Helix in full, along with lists of test subjects, disposal reports, procurement orders, everything Prime had ever wanted buried. Names he recognized. Names that had once been whispered in conspiracy forums, dismissed by officials, mourned quietly by families who never received closure. And there, under one tragic entry dated 10 years prior, Subject 19, Jacob Hayes terminated. Marcus's vision blurred with rage. He reached for a portable hard drive from a supply shelf, jamming it into the server, initiating a data dump. Files scrolled across the screen, a tidal wave of secrets finally being ripped from their fortress of lies. But even as the drive filled, Marcus knew it wasn't over. Not yet. A flicker on one of the old monitors caught his eye. A security feed, grainy and black and white, but showing clear movement in the upper corridors. Carlisle's men, sweeping room by room, methodical, relentless. They were coming, and they wouldn't stop until Barnes, Marcus, and every scrap of evidence had been wiped clean. Shadow barked sharply, snapping Marcus out of his frozen rage. He yanked the drive free, shoving it into his jacket as he hoisted Barnes back into his arms. No time to waste, they needed an exit. As if sensing the urgency, Shadow darted toward the far side of the lab, where a section of wall had collapsed inward from some ancient structural failure. Beyond it yawned a maintenance shaft, partially flooded but navigable, a back door built by negligence and decay. Marcus didn't hesitate. He sloshed through the ankle-deep water, Shadow paddling ahead, the gurney wheels squealing as he forced it through the muck. Every step was agony, every breath a struggle against the thick, fetid air. But he kept moving, one foot in front of the other, driven by fury, by grief, by the... Behind him, the servers continued to hum, oblivious to the firestorm about to be unleashed. Somewhere ahead, light flickered, faint but real, a way out. A future. Marcus pushed harder, muscles burning, mind locked into a singular purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. For Jacob, for Barnes, for every name etched into PR forgotten walls. They emerged into a storm drain behind the hospital, gasping for air, blinking against the sudden flood of moonlight. Shadow shook himself violently, sending water flying, and barked once, sharp and triumphant. Marcus collapsed onto the cracked concrete, cradling Barnes carefully, the hard drive pressed against his chest like a holy relic. In the distance, sirens wailed, helicopters thumped overhead, but Marcus felt no fear, not anymore. A new war had begun, one fought in the shadows, with ghosts and blood and unwavering determination. Prime might have survived this night, their roots ran deep, their network vast, but they had underestimated one thing. Marcus Hayes wasn't alone. He had Shadow, he had the truth, and he wasn't stopping, not now, not ever. If this story pulled you in, if you felt every beat of Marcus and Shadow's fight for the truth, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It's the only way we can keep telling stories that stay with you long after the last word. What part of the story hit you the hardest? Was it when Marcus uncovered the truth about his brother? Or when Shadow led him into the darkness that changed everything? And while you're here, where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.